Welcome to Politics and Tactics. Tonight, we got a great show. It's a huge honor to have the previous former chief of Houston Fire Department, the fourth largest fire department in the country, Chief, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name, but Chief Sam Peña? Peña?
Right.
My dyslexia gets me a little bit, but
good to go, Chief.
So impressed with your leadership over the years. When we wrote the book Command Presence that PJ also contributed to, we put Sam's section right in the very first chapter. He's a consummate professional, somebody I always respected, and it's a real honor to talk to him tonight. PJ, can you introduce both of our great guests for us?
Yeah, Frank, thanks. I'd love to. As Frank said, we have two great guests. As always tonight, we have Chief Samuel Peña, who's retired from the Houston Fire Department. The chief brings over 30 years of public safety leadership experience, most recently serving as the fire chief of Houston Fire Department, following 22 years with El Paso Fire, including 4 years as chief there. He began his career with 4 years of service to the U.S. Air Force. Chief, thank you for your service. He's also led some significant major events. So we talk about Super Bowl 51, which was New England Patriots versus Atlanta Falcons with, not to the New England fans here. New England won that. And then one of the other ones, Chief, I'm going to have to reserve my comments, multiple World Series. As a New York Yankee fan, I'm just going to reserve my comments there. No disrespect to the Houston fans listening to
Good man.
Yeah. And Chief Otto Drozd. So Chief Drozd is a veteran leader in fire and emergency service with over 35 years of experience dedicated to advancing public safety, firefighter health, and operational excellence. Is executive secretary of the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Association. He leads national and international collaborations, driving innovation in wildfire response, emerging technologies, and firefighter resilience. He's also very involved in NFPA 3000, which is the ASHER program. And he has served as fire chief in Seminole County, Florida, or Orange County, Florida, El Paso, Texas. He's managed multiple million-dollar budgets, enhancing emergency management preparedness. He secured ISO Class 1 rating and accreditations for fire EMS, emergency service management. So, man, and this is just like a small piece of both of their bios. If I spent the entire time on what these two gentlemen and consummate professionals have done in their career, we wouldn't have time to actually talk with them. Frank, you always seem to pull the best leaders into these conversations. So, Chiefs, welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you both.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And Frank and PJ, look, before we dive in, I want to thank you guys and again express my appreciation to both of you for the outstanding contributions that you guys have made to fire engineering. I think that you guys sharing your practical knowledge and the important conversations, I think elevates the profession that we're in and we all love. And honestly, it's saved lives. So it's an honor to be here with you guys today and with my good friend and mentor, Otto Drozd.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, likewise. I'm honored to be here as well. And, I had a conversation the other day with somebody and, we have all these groups working, post World Fire Congress. So they're working on all these different communities of practice. And I asked them, well, what are you going to do with the information? Because there's a lot of great information we're coming up with. And they go, well, we don't know yet. And so I'm glad that we're here because this is a platform to get the information out to the people that need it most. And that's our firefighters in the field.
Well, we appreciate that. And before PJ is going to kind of moderate and run down the list, one thing that's been in the news that I think it's worth mentioning, because with Chief Peña here, I think he's the perfect guest to address this, is right now under the Trump administration, we now have English as our primary language in America, which I do agree with. However, I don't want to get lost in communication, especially from the fire department. And one of the things that I really appreciated about Chief Peña is if you follow his Twitter account, he'll tweet in Spanish, he'll tweet in English. He's reaching out to the populations. And I caution conservatives out there, yes, we want everybody to speak English, but we have to reach out to communities where they are. And many people forget that the Declaration of Independence was actually one of the first copies was copied in German so they could reach out to the German population in Pennsylvania because they knew they wanted one country.
Absolutely.
Being a son of an immigrant couple one generation away from the boat. We were with my grandparents, and my father said he never saw his parents fight. And I said, how could that be? Your parents never argued? And he's like, no, I've never saw my parents argue. And so we were at the table and we're talking, and I'm like, well, why didn't you ever teach my father Italian? And they said, my father like jumped in. He's like, oh, well, because they wanted us to be Americans. And my grandfather said, no, it's so we could argue and fight in Italian. And you had no idea what we were saying. So.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Chief. I think, public safety should transcend politics. And I think that our job is to ensure that we're reaching, as you mentioned, we're reaching the people that we're serving. And one of the critical things that any fire chief should do, and any fire service leader, public safety leader, is know the community that they're serving, because look, it all affects the work and the delivery of service that we provide. If we're not communicating, especially the safety recommendations, the safety aspects, the community risk reduction plans, if we're not communicating those directly to the people in a language or in a way that they can consume it and internalize it, then we're missing the boat.
I think that's very well said. PJ?
Yeah, Chief. And, I agree. And it's interesting. I actually just had a conversation, Frank, and I know you'll appreciate this. So Frank was kind of instrumental in helping me get this idea off the ground, is creating a skill set video library for the state of Connecticut. So while we're doing that in-house, and all my instructors for the majority speak English, and that's how we teach. It's also important that we now have all those videos translated into Spanish to help meet some of all of our firefighters across the state. But finding somebody to do that here in the academy has been a little bit of a challenge. My Spanish-speaking instructors are struggling with some of the different dialects, something I don't know anything about. So, Frank, it's kind of funny you mentioned that, because I just had some conversations on that today, so I appreciate it. So, Frank, when Frank set this call up, we asked for a list of topics that, the two of you, two chiefs, would like to discuss tonight. And man, this list, we could probably just take one of these items and talk about them for the hour. And in looking through them, I think something that's, I'm a little sensitive to right now is extreme weather impacts on the fire service. Connecticut is not known for wildfires. We don't have what the two of you know as wildfires. However, we have brush fires. And this past October, we saw something that we've never seen in the state before. We had 227 brush fires within that 30-day period. Now, none of those reached the extremes of what we see in California or out west. But for the state, having 227 fires that were focused on just one topic of brush fires was very significant for us, and there's a lot of things that we learned. So I'm interested, and we'll go to Chief Otto Drozd first, is if you would talk about that a little bit, talk about a little about your experience and what a small state like Connecticut should be looking at to do, and what we can learn from our brothers and sisters across the country.
Yeah, it's interesting because both Sam and I were in LA recently, and we got to fly over the LA wildfires and really see, the confluence of things that really happened to really cause those fires to be as big and as destructive as they were. And the thing about LA, while that's, kind of the epicenter of California, it's happening everywhere. Just this past week, there was wildfires in the Florida Keys. We have them in South Carolina, in Tennessee. In fact, they're across the globe, from Greece to Slovenia to Italy. The London Fire Brigade had their first wildfire just a couple of years ago and were ill prepared for it. So really what we're seeing is it's happening more frequently in those places that are used to them. And it's happening in places that weren't used to them. So really what we're looking at, and we have a presentation at the Metro this year called Wildfire 360. So we're looking at those reactions that can be done within communities, community outreach, with the fire service to really make their homes safe and their properties safe, because wildfire is a reality that you're dealing with it in Connecticut, and they're dealing with it across the globe. So that community piece the building codes are under assault. That's another topic, but we look at, they're trying to degrade our building codes. If buildings are built to code, they will withstand the pressures of wildfires. And then it's equipping, training our firefighters. And one of the topics is the deployments as well, because right now the deployments at the national level, and we can talk about that later, are inefficient for some of the responses that we have to have within communities. So it's a several-pronged attack, starting with the community and the firefighters who are the front lines.
Yeah, and being the director of the State Fire Training Academy, that's the interesting piece, is getting the subject matter experts that are needed to do this widespread training, that what we actually need, trying to take structural firefighters, which we do a great job at educating firefighters to be structural firefighters, into the wildland kind of environment, when our environment's really not a wildland environment. Yeah, we definitely have some areas in the state that we can reach what we've seen across the country, but it's a little different. They're ground fires, low-moving ground fires. So it's interesting. Chief Peña?
Well, I mean, you guys are hitting the nail on the head. I think that the reality is that our mission is ever expanding. And as our population grows and we encroach into areas that historically were wildland, this is going to happen more often. I mean, if you read the news, the federal government is looking into opening up lands that were national owned lands for building housing and addressing that critical shortage. So we're gonna see this more often in areas that we hadn't seen it in the past. Here in Houston, a few years ago, and I took some knocks on it because we were doing some controlled burns in an area that a large green space area within the city. And you think of Houston or the major large city, and you think of a concrete jungle, right? Why are you doing controlled burns? Well, if we don't mitigate those things, if we don't do the vegetation management, then we can get into areas where a fire, when it starts, and they will start, whether it's lightning or whether it's accidental or whatever, it grows to the point where it becomes overwhelming sometimes. So I think that, look, if we learned anything, is that in what we're facing and our mission kind of creeping into areas that historically had been somebody else's responsibility. I think that as a fire service, what we need to focus on is first that preparation and training is key. Even in things that you in functions that you historically had not gotten into, doing a good assessment of the risk in your environment, preparing and training. Second, interagency coordination is critical. If 9/11 and Harvey taught us anything, is that even the largest departments in the country, at some point they may need some help, and you don't want to be exchanging business cards at the command post, right? You want to be able to have those networks and those relationships built out before the issue rises. Third, I think that adaptability is going to be critical for the fire service moving forward. And then finally, I think communication with both the internal personnel as far as why we're doing certain things, and then with the community. We need to be out there. We need to be engaged, and kind of teaching them why it is that we're moving and expending resources in certain areas. And one of the ways you do that is you got to be present. One of the main things I learned integrating from El Paso into Houston is that you can't trust somebody you don't know, right? And the way you know somebody is you got to get out in the community. You got to be present. They got to know what your thoughts are. You got to listen to what they're expecting from their fire department. So, I mean, this is all an opportunity for us to engage even more with the communities that we serve.
That's very well said. PJ, just one thing I'd like to mention on what the chief said about you don't want to be giving out business cards in the command post. In a lot of departments in the country, I'll pick on the cops. It's hard to get a police chief in the command post at times. So one of the things that I recommend, especially on that active shooter call, Chief Otto, I know that you've been instrumental in the Asher's program, the NFPA for active shooter. But one of the things that I tell, especially in Connecticut, there's 169 towns, but all small communities and smaller cities, where you know that you're going to have problems working with the police department or getting in mutual aid police departments is I recommend to chiefs that they get on the radio and say, I need a police officer to report to the command post with command authority. So that way, one, it's over the air. And two, you don't. I've been in an active shooter call before where they sent a patrol officer who had 6 months on the job who couldn't make a decision. So that's not who we want at the command post. So you got to get somebody there. Chief Otto, what's your take on that?
No, you're absolutely right. And really what we advocate for in active shooter, which I think is applicable to all of these types of large scale incidents, is that we start at the very lowest level and you start building at the firefighter level in the academies. One of the ones that did it really well was Las Vegas. They had actual firefighters going and teaching command in the police academy, and they have that cross-pollination. So now it starts building layer upon layer. So now it's like when we talk about cell phones and how kids, it's native to them. They're natives with the cell phone. They know how to manage those. If we do it at the lowest level and get our firefighters accustomed to working with other agencies on a regular basis through not only the planned drills, but some of the unplanned ones, and really taking command on every incident and making sure that coordination there is on every incident, then I think we'll start building that capacity within our service.
P.J.?
Yeah, so one of the topics on the list kind of goes right along with this conversation. Talks about lessons from coordinating large-scale emergency incidents. And Chief Peña, we could look at some of the non-emergency and emergency incidents that you have been in command of, from the World Series events to the Super Bowl events to Harvey. And I know you have a few more than a couple on your list there. If you were to list the top two things that you've learned from all of those combined, that someone out there listening to this show who has not had the opportunity yet to manage a large incident like that, or to plan for a planned incident like the Super Bowl, what would you tell them are the two most important things?
Look, I think the two most important things, one is the preparation aspect. You can't overly prepare for some of these instances or incidents or events. Coordination is going to be key, the planning and the bringing in those additional resources that are going to be part of the command post ahead of time. You got to war game this thing out and think of all the contingencies and at least have a plan A and plan B set out ahead of time and rehearsed in some fashion before the event arrives. And that, just going through that process, PJ, assists, because even though it's not a planned event, those large scale incidents, there's a lot of adaptability or applicability on those as well. We had the Astro World event here in Houston as well. There was that concert where, unfortunately, we lost 10 lives due to a crowd crush, right? It's, again, that was a perfect example of what can happen if you don't have a well-coordinated, well-rehearsed plan laid out before an event. That event was coordinated by the county. It was a county facility. And the only thing we were invited in was to permit some of the pyrotechnics and so on and so forth. But when things went south, when they went off the rails, we were the first ones that they called out, and going in there without any situational awareness is not a place you want to be. And so anything that happens or a planned event in your community, preparation and training is going to be key. And second, the interagency coordination is going to be critical to a safe event.
And I think those planned events are a missed opportunity for many departments, right?
Exactly.
When you have a planned event that you can get everybody around the table, you could come up with your plan A, your plan B, you can war game it, as you said, right? And then you could have a successful incident with nothing happen. That's perfect. Right. But when you have a planned event, that helps you prepare for all the unplanned events that you have yet seen. And I've seen it in my department from some previous administrations who, we may be having a firework event and you're only going to have 10 or 15,000 people. That's the perfect time to bring everybody together and plan for something major, right? Instead of just, we'll see what happens. Right. And then you're not prepared for those emergency events that do happen. Frank?
Right. That's exactly it, Chief.
Chief Otto, weigh in?
Yeah. And so really, when you're speaking about this, it really reminds me of something that we keep on harping on. It's those planned events that you start building that capacity. It builds that muscle memory for the unplanned events. Because in the fire service, if we don't practice, if we don't have the repetition, if we don't do those things on the front end, then when those very serious unplanned events come, then we're going to be at a loss. But if we can build that muscle memory, it's just like any other memory. It may not be exactly the same, but we're narrowing the scope of the event down because we have experience that we've built over time in those planned events.
Exactly it.
Yes, you guys have seen some major events planned and unplanned, and today we're in a little different place than what we were a year ago with the National Emergency Deployment System. So, what's your thoughts as far as where we are today, maybe where we're going with putting more of the response and the responsibilities on the states versus from the federal side? And I know we're kind of walking that line here of maybe some unknowns, because we really don't know what the future looks like with some of this stuff right now. But Chief Peña, we'll start with you. What are some of your thoughts as far as the National Emergency Deployment System and maybe some of the rumors that are out there or some of the stuff in the media of where we may be coming up in our near future?
Look, here's my thought on this is that the responsibility should really rest with the local departments. I mean, we're going to be the initial responders to any incident. Right, we should be planning, even aside from whatever may change here, Chief, is that we should be planning to address and be self-contained for at least 2 or 3 days, and if we can do that, if we can give ourselves that much runway and ensure that we have the logistics and the planning and the personnel and the rotation schedules laid out to be able to have a response to a sustained incident, it's going to make us a better prepared organization, whether it's a small department or it's a large department. It forces us to engage with our neighbors, right? It forces us to ensure that we have those mutual aid agreements or those handshake agreements in place to be able to share resources. Look, we had, when I was the chief there in Houston, it was a bright sunny day like you see behind me one day. And Houston is prone to flooding, right? Anytime it rains or whatever, we get significant flooding here in Houston. It was a bright sunny day just like you see here behind me. And I-10 or I-45 was flooded, a whole neighborhood underwater. We lost an 8-inch or an 8-foot pipe, transmission pipe, water pipe that coming into the city. It provided, I think they said, about 50% of the water into the city, and it busted and it just flooded the entire neighborhood. We weren't planning for being without any hydrants, especially in a large municipality. We take that for granted, that our hydrant system is going to work, but without having the relationships with the volunteer departments, who a lot of times in the unincorporated areas, they don't have the water system and the distribution system that we enjoy here in major cities. They have certain resources, tankers and so on and so forth, that they make available for themselves. If we didn't have those relationships with those departments, we wouldn't have been able to pull in several of those resources to stage fire protection in those areas that were affected a couple of years ago. So yes, it's different. Yes, the onus is going to be on the local municipalities to do the risk assessment, to do the legwork, right, and to prepare to respond for a certain number of days before the feds can come in. But we should be doing that anyways.
And I think that goes right back to that planning. You know, your department should be able to, within your state and city resources, operate within a couple of days before the cavalry arrives, because
Correct.
that's how you're going to provide the best service. Chief Otto, what is your take on the system?
Yeah, well, to me, I'm actually, while there's always a little bit of trepidation with change, I think we could actually find ourselves in a better situation potentially, because this is something we've been talking about at the national level for many years. There's a lot of states that do mutual aid very well, disaster response very well, move resources very well. And we talked, in the fire service, we talk about all hazards response, right? At the national level, ESF 4 is run by the Department of Agriculture under forestry. Right? The Department of Agriculture, right? And we'll leave it there for a second, right? So, when we talk about who is going to be on the front line, it's the structural firefighters. And I have this conversation all the time. I go, we have a standing army of over, 1 million firefighters that if you ask them, I don't think there's one that's not going to raise their hand and say, yes, I'll go. But what we see is that because some of the states aren't as well equipped or don't have those robust systems of deploying resources within state, and sometimes because they're not supported by the federal government in the way that an ESF 9 is for USAR deployments, which actually pre-deploys resources to where they need to be, has them on site, and really spurs the recovery much, much quicker. So I think we're actually at a point in time, because of some of the things that are happening, while they may be painful, we may be in a better place to have the federal government operate in the way that it should. And what that is to support local resources in the work that they're doing, not to supplant local resources, but to support them and get them the resources they need in a timely manner in order to mitigate the incidents, to get people back to a level of normalcy, so that we don't have the examples that we're living through right now in North Carolina and other places.
I think that's very well said. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about a little bit was strategic resource management during budget constraints. And I think what we see at DOGE, and regardless of how any individual feels about it, the fact is there is waste, fraud, and abuse, and we need to look at that. And what it really reminds me of is kind of a need for the fire department to do that zero-based budgeting, to be able to justify all of our actions. And now that we know that there are going to be changes at the federal level, it would behoove fire departments and states to look at that zero-based budgeting for the items so that they can make sure they have proper budget justification when asking for things from the federal government. Chief Peña?
No, you're absolutely right, Chief. I mean, look, we should be budgeting and planning for the expected risk in our community. And a lot of times when what I found, and I've worked in 2 different cities with a little different approach to the annual budget requisitions. Sometimes it's just, hey, what did you have last year? Let's add 3%. Without really looking at, are the programs that we're implementing or we're funding appropriate? Are they meeting the need? Are we meeting our strategic goals, right? Is what we're doing aligning with the city's strategic vision and goal for serving our community? So there is we should be going through that exercise, as painful as it is every year. We should be going through the exercise of evaluating, justifying our programs, and then communicating with the people that approve our budgets that, look, this budget represents buying down certain risk. right? Essentially, because that's what we're doing. Our budget represents how much risk that exists in our community we're going to buy down. And we should be able to quantify that and saying, with this budget, we will have X amount of service delivery, X amount of response times, this number of public education sessions. I mean, everything costs some money, but we should be getting to that granular level as a fire chief to ensure that we are being appropriate stewards of the taxpayers' money.
I think that's very well said. And I think we're seeing even at the National Fire Academy, everything's on hold right now because they're trying to figure out where this money is, where it's going, but the need doesn't change. So the states, until this is all figured out, have to be able to step up a little bit and make sure that they can justify their budgets to continue that valuable training. Chief Otto, you'd like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, in fact, it's an interesting topic because, a lot of times we don't have the data to really prove our case. And then what happens is we become easy targets. So we need to develop those data points that are really going to prove our case. For instance, we need more stations, right? Well, that costs a lot of money. Are they going to give it to us? Well, if we go in and we say, look, we've tightened up everything on our end, from turnout time to response time, but now we have greater population growth, we have construction, we have greater businesses coming in. I can't ask my engineers to drive faster to a call. If I'm as efficient with the things that you give me, then it becomes a very simple narrative. It becomes, okay, level of service, the resources that you're providing, right? And demand. So if one of those is out of alignment, then you need more resources to meet the demand so that you can maintain the level of service. But on our end, we have to be able to prove that we're doing the best job with the resources that we're given in order to make sure that narrative holds true. Because I've been before boards and I've gone, look, sometimes what you get with less is just less. But let's have an honest conversation that, what I hate to see is fire chiefs go up there and they say, they cut 30 million from my budget and I'm going to be able to do the same job I always did. And that happens every day. So how does that work? So did you need the 30 million or did you not need the 30 million to begin with? So we have to be good stewards. And, when you said zero-based budgeting, that's exactly what this is. They're just saying, okay, you need that program? Prove to me that you need it rather than incrementally increasing the amount that you're asking for when you haven't used it for the last 5 years. I think part of it's on us.
And I'm just going to jump in on the pause of the NFA, because obviously as a state training director, that's a worrisome piece for me. Here in Connecticut, we send thousands of firefighters to National Fire Academy each and every year. We just had our National Fire Academy Officers Weekend canceled for the end of the month. What I need to look at and what other state training directors need to look at is right now and forever, we can't eliminate the high quality education. And if that's not going to take place at the NFA, which I hope that it does, right? We enjoy our partnership with the NFA. I think that we are an extension of the National Fire Academy at the state level, but they absolutely offer things that we currently don't offer here at the state level. But state fire training directors, including myself, we need to start looking at, well, what's plan B? If the National Fire Academy doesn't come back on board with this specialized training, we still have firefighters in Connecticut that need that. So how are we going to fill that gap? How are we going to fill that void to make sure that the firefighters, the officers, and the chief level officers of the state of Connecticut receive that training until the National Fire Academy is back up and running, which we fully support. And that's not something that was on my bingo card for this year, but it is now, trying to figure out how we're going to bring that high quality specialized training here to Connecticut if this pause goes on longer than what we hope that it does. And I just want to get back to some of the planning piece, right? Some of these planned events and these unplanned events is one thing that I've seen missing in a lot of those is the recovery piece for our firefighters. I think we do a great job of the recovery piece for our communities, but the recovery piece for the mental health of our responders. When we have these planned events, are we considering bringing in our mental health professionals and working with them so when we have these unplanned events, we know who those folks are to help our firefighters through that mental health piece? Chief Peña, what's your thought on that, on getting the mental health professionals involved in the planned events so we have that face-to-face recognition and we're not, like you said earlier, exchanging those business cards at the command post? Those planned events, we normally don't need that mental health piece, but we do know for those unplanned events, we need to make sure that we have them involved.
Yeah, Chief, I think that topic speaks a little bit to what you were referring to with the NFA. When we start cutting programs because we cannot see the immediate impact, right? It's just like our plumbing, right? If it's behind the walls, we don't see it until it breaks. And if we don't invest in the training, in the research, in the mental health aspect ahead of time, we will and we are seeing that impact. We've had here in the city of Houston in the last 6 weeks, we've had 4 sheriff's deputies that have committed suicide. That is a heartbreaking tragedy, and it speaks to the lack of focus, right, on that particular aspect, because the PTSD issue is real. It doesn't check out, it doesn't clock out when you leave the office or the station or you go home. I think this is something cumulative that builds up, and it is a critical component that needs to be funded, that needs to be justified in our annual budgets to ensure that we're preparing for the mental health and well-being of our firefighters. And it should come as part of the package. To your point, when we're planning these events, that should be one of the resources that we have available to us at a moment's notice, if not at the command post or accessible on the scene. But we shouldn't be having to look through a Rolodex when we need them, right? We should know exactly who to call, and they should be familiar with the type of work that our first responders, firefighters, police officers do to be able to assist them at a critical point, especially when we have these tragic events, mass casualties, and what have you.
Chief Otto?
Yeah, and the encouraging part about this discussion is we're not where we need to be, but we're much better than we were. And that's attributed to a lot of the experiences that we've had. So when we talk about NFPA 3000, for instance, there's a whole chapter on recovery that the mental health aspect for our first responders is integral to that planning process. Should be integral to the planning process for any major event, because we know through experience the impacts that our firefighters and police officers are suffering in the field. And they need an outlet for it. So we are getting much better at building those programs. And you see through the IFF, through the IFC, through a lot of the different resources, we're starting to focus more acutely on that mental health aspect. And we're getting to the root causes of that mental health crisis that we're suffering in. But you're exactly right. It has to be an integral part of our planning process, and we have to have the resources. Just like we would deploy a strike team of engines, we should have mental health professionals that we could deploy at a moment's notice where they're needed to help those that need them in their greatest time of need. For instance, Surfside. We had the Surfside collapse. I had a team that went down there, and they were not only taking care of the victims and the families of the victims, but they were taking care of the firefighters on scene. So I think, that's one of those ones where you can't necessarily quantify in dollars and cents the investment, but we save just one firefighter, then any amount that we've invested is worth the effort.
Absolutely. And if I may piggyback on what Otto was mentioning, we've have for some time now, I think we've invested departments across the country in critical incident stress management programs, and it becomes another program. But I think that some of the lessons learned that I've picked up is that traditional critical incident debriefings don't often address the cumulative stress impact of the men and women in the fire service. I think peer support programs, they work much better than the mandatory, hey, you got to sit through this class type of approach. And it's on us, I think, to build more than a program, but I think an expectation that the mental health aspect of our job is something that we consider as part of our pre-planning and as part of our culture, right? Creating a system, for example, where family members can call in and say, "Hey, I think there's something going on with my loved one," and then having a program to ensure that we're following up the right way, and not just a firefighter to another saying, "Hey, man, suck it up." Those days are gone. Those days, we should be past that. We should know enough now to understand that PTSD is a real thing. And so it's going to take some time. It's going to take some focus, just like we've focused and we've gotten really good at the emergency response, the hazmat, the water rescues, the things that are on our plate that they do day to day. This is one of those items that we should be focused on. I mean, as I said, they lost 4 sheriff's officers here in the last 6 weeks. If any of you all in your departments as chiefs, if you had lost 4 members, the association, they should. If they're not, I can't see them not doing this. They would have been knocking down your door saying, "We need to do something, chief." But we shouldn't wait for that moment to happen. We shouldn't wait to lose folks to this mental health issue, and we should be doing those things and justifying them just like any other major program in our system.
Yeah, and I'd just like to follow up on what Chief Peña said. The other thing is building the resilience within our fire service as well. So what I mean by that is when we look at our standards for firefighters, our standards for officers, we should be building in as a critical element that mental health training. From the academy all the way through every promotional rank, so that we not only build the resiliency, but we build the awareness of what we're seeing before it gets to a point where you're now in crisis.
On the mental health aspect, and I think we could, all 4 of us would agree that we got a lot of work still to do, but the fire service has come a really long way from the time that we all entered in the fire service for mental health. One word of caution. I agree with everything everybody said on this call, but one thing that I'm starting to see that's missing, besides expanding all of this other issues, is in the fire academy, we still need to instill in our firefighters that at the emergency scene, when the public still needs us, they have to perform no matter what. And the PTSD and all of the other stuff isn't an excuse. And I'll just give 2 quick examples. A paramedic that shows up to a 3-year-old that drowned in a pool with the family there, and instead of jumping in the pool, starts throwing up. A line of duty death in New Haven in a fire where the lieutenant was unconscious. A firefighter was pulling the lieutenant to the window, and we all know that it's not like the movies. One firefighter isn't going to lift the lieutenant up over the window. He's going to need some help, and he's calling to a firefighter on the ladder to get in to get the lieutenant out the window, and the firefighter was crying on the ladder. So it's almost like the pendulum sometimes goes a little bit too far. So I agree. We need to wrap everybody in cotton and give them the hug and make sure all those programs are there. But in the academy, when we let them know that program's there, we can't lose the public in this to say, when something's going on at the emergency, as Brunacini said, if it's an emergency to us, who are we going to call? But this isn't a mental health emergency at this point. Mitigate the incident, and then we need to mitigate mental health in that order. And PJ knows I'm a firm believer in this because I fought to have him come into New Haven for peer support when I was the union president.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, Chief. You're not wrong. Look, the academy should give them a sense of what they can expect, out in the field. We should be doing bump tests, right? As far as stressing the stress level in a controlled environment, to get them a sense of what to expect when they get out in the field. But I think that more importantly, in some of those instances that you mentioned, I believe that maybe we miss some behavioral changes or some indications before that happened, right? Where we should have identified, we should have trained our officers or our firefighters to be able to recognize certain indicators, to where we don't get into a situation where it's manifested at the worst critical time. And that's, I guess that's what we're talking about here is how do we train, how do we prepare our people to be able to, one, to recognize it, and two, to take advantage of some of these resources that are out there, because we understand the critical nature of our job and the fact that we need to, mission is first. When we get on those trucks, mission is first. The saying, people always, yes, but mission is first, right? And that's what we should be focused on. On the back end, when it's not a critical incident or time, that's when we should start having these conversations and ensuring that we are giving them the tools to succeed and the tools for our officers to ensure the well-being of their personnel.
Very well said, PJ.
Yeah, and Chiefs, I think you definitely hit down the head. It starts in the academy, and there's one thing that we've done here at the Connecticut Fire Academy that, based on what we've realized, is by putting a chaplain in place to meet with these recruits, who's not just kind of wrapping them in cotton, but also teaching them some resiliency. Because there's a book that I'm reading right now called The Anxious Generation. And when you start looking at the current generation of public safety professionals, not just fire service that's coming through, they're a generation that's been built on social media. And, when all three of us had a disagreement with somebody our age when we were growing up on the playground, it turned into something that it doesn't today. It was an argument or a fist fight, or you get pushed down in the dirt, right? That's not necessarily happening today. This generation, they get into a disagreement, it's delete. They pick up their phone and they delete them, and they unfollow them, or they don't continue that conversation. So they haven't had that chance to build that resiliency that they need in public safety. They need to understand how to have those courageous conversations. They have to understand that you're going to get knocked down, and you're going to see these things, and you're going to experience these things, and you're going to have to do things that we were kind of built for, not intentionally based on the way that we were raised. But the current generation, not saying it's wrong, that's the generation that we have entering public safety. So as the leaders of the fire service, we have to understand what's coming in and look for ways to educate them up front. I think we do a great job at peer support, and I agree with you. Peer support definitely is much better than the old, models that we were following. But I think departments really need to work on the education piece up front, right, and prepare our responders for that stuff, not just after the fact.
Right. Chief, you know what? You mentioned the anxious generation. I'm in the process of, I just started that book, and I recommend it. If you guys haven't read it, I'm maybe a chapter in, and it's an excellent book, and it does talk about the differences and what we can expect, right, from the social media or the technology generation now. Because it's in our jobs, by the time we get to a position of a leadership for an organization, we have multi-generations that are in our department. And if you don't stay abreast of what drives them, what makes them tick, some of the things that, some of the things that they have in their knapsack as they're coming into your organization, we're gonna miss the boat, because we're not all the same. They're not all the same. And we need to ensure that we're, again, looking and being adaptive to what the needs of our organization is.
Yeah, and I think that's what it goes back to your point on the NFA, right? The NFA in another realm, right, is building our leadership capacity within organizations. So if we're losing that, then how do we fill that gap? We're losing some of the resiliency that other generations once had, but so we need to replace that. And when I talk to people, I go, it's not that generations are any better or any worse than the ones before them. It's just that we need to know where our focus needs to be in order to get them to a level of resilience that's going to be as good or better than each one of those generations before them.
And as leaders, we can't say this generation sucks. As leaders, we have to say, well, what is this generation and how do we help them succeed and be better than what we were and better than what our mentors are? So Chief Otto, I couldn't agree with you more.
Hey, Chief, I think that, if we're honest about it, they were probably saying that about us when we came on, right?
They definitely were.
Yes.
They definitely were. So yeah, no, you're right. We need to be adaptable because in the end, our job is to ensure, look, when people that we serve call 911, they don't care how the sausage is made. They don't care about anything other than when they call 911, they know what's going to happen. One of us is going to show up and they're going to address their needs and make things a little bit better than how they found them. And so that's our job, is to not lose of the sight of the what our mission is. Yes, all these other things that need to happen because we get work done through and with people. That's on us to stay informed, to stay current, to stay in the books, to get out into the community, to visit with our firefighters to see what it is that they're lacking. That's on us, because in the end, when somebody calls 911, there should be no doubt about what's going to happen. Somebody's going to arrive, and we're going to take care of their issue.
Absolutely. Chief Otto, something that's going on across the country, and I think your experience might provide some answers to some fire chiefs, or at least some insight, is what's going on with the supply chain and ordering apparatus and bidding on apparatus, because that seems to be an issue that's affecting large departments all the way down to your smaller departments now.
Yeah, it's interesting because, originally when this started rearing its head, it was 5 years ago when COVID was happening, right? And they said, well, because of COVID, we have the supply chain issues, this, that, the other, and now the prices were going up, and because the prices were going up, and you wanted to get in before the prices went up anymore, the ordering went up, and then it extended the manufacture time. So today, 5 years later, we have trucks and apparatus that are 50, 75%, 100% more than they were 5 years ago. And they're taking 48 months for delivery. Now we're looking at this. There's a committee that's been formed with the IFC, the Metro, the Wisconsin Fire Chiefs, and we're looking at it, and we're looking at what are some of those recommendations. But from the Metro's perspective, we're looking at it from a unique perspective. When you look at the United States, there's some 20 to 25,000 unique fire departments, right? Give or take. And then when you look at the different models of fire trucks, there's probably some 20,000 to 25,000 unique models of fire trucks because they're all custom made, right? That's more models than all the domestic car makers make on a yearly basis. If you look at the Fords, the BMWs, the Chevys, everybody, that's more models of vehicles than they have in the domestic car market. So part of it is an internal look as well. So we're looking at, do you need, like you go into Pierce's showroom and there's 400 different colors of red or shades of red. Can we make it with 4 or 5, you think? Can we make it with 4 or 5 different shades of red? Can we all, kind of coalesce around, 1,000, 1,500 GPM pumper in a 1,000-gallon tank, or something that's at least deployable. So we're looking at a national spec that can be built much quicker. The training for the mechanics on the line for the manufacturers would be reduced. The training for the mechanics at home would be reduced if we had a national spec. Now the deployments, we would have interoperability, we would have all of these things. But we need everybody to come together because, some of the things that are also happening, there was an article that came out about capital equity firms that are buying up, like the Rev Group, that are buying up some of the manufacturers. And there's a question on, is the manufacturing capacity growing to meet the demand within the marketplace? Because when you look at supply and demand, if there's a high demand, then your capacity should go up and then it should level off. But that's not happening. Right now, the demand continues to be high, the prices continue to be high, and the wait times are astronomical. So I think it's, I've touched on a few of those points, but I think, there's something internally that we can do, and working with the manufacturers, there's something we can do on that end as well.
So Frank, I know you agree. Maybe before we start looking at the reds, if we can just get rid of the yellows and the greens to start, we'd be making progress.
Henry Ford said you could have a Model T in any color you want as long as it's black.
That's right. That's right.
So
Chief Peña, anything on apparatus specs? And I don't know if it was related to the Houston Fire Department, so I guess it's a good time to ask the question. What I hear a lot of departments, even in Connecticut, talk about the Houston spec.
Yeah, we so at one point there was, as Otto mentioned, it was something unique to Houston. But when I got here, Chief, what we needed was trucks, and what we needed to do is, at the time we had 5 different models of trucks and brands of trucks, and our mechanics at the shop were pulling their hair out. Right, they couldn't be experts at every one of those, and so it was delaying the maintenance, it was delaying the repairs. So we made a strategic shift to say we're going to go with one particular brand, much as Otto is describing, one particular brand, one particular style, bare minimum to get water on the fire. We don't need the gold leaf, and we don't need all the bells and whistles. We just need an apparatus to get our personnel on scene and have it function as expected. And so we made that strategic decision. It increased our delivery time, or it improved our delivery time by a small percentage, but still, where we're competing, it was right in the middle of right before COVID, and then COVID hit, and it was we felt the same pinch that everybody else did. But no, I think that makes sense, is to have a standard apparatus that can be deployed and can be mass produced. Because what happens is, as the assembly line goes, if a particular department doesn't buy one, they have to keep that assembly line going, right? So if they all match, then it doesn't matter who purchases them. We can pick one of 5 colors, as Otto mentioned, instead of one of 400, and then off we go. Right. In the end, again, we want serviceable units on scene. We want to have a less than a 4-year wait on these apparatus, and something that's going to give us some reliability, because the service demand is increasing. We're running the wheels off of these things, and without a good pipeline to get a replacement in, we're going to be in a heap of trouble here in the next few years.
And I wanted to ask a question to you all, because this is something that I've been thinking about. If we're paying that much more for apparatus, we're waiting that much longer, where's that resource coming from? Are we investing in our firefighters? Are we investing in the mental health? Can we invest to the level of training if we're spending so much more on apparatus than we did before? Are we providing for our community's need? because if your apparatus are taking a larger percentage of your overall budget, then something else is not being serviced in the way that it needs to be.
Yeah. Yep. You're squeezing that balloon, right? And you're losing something.
And something out there, just last thing on apparatus, and I just want to put it out for fire chiefs. If you have that apparatus committee and you want that one fire truck designed this way, don't rig the bid. If there's a reason that you want this one particular piece of apparatus, go to your town council, your borough leadership, and say you want it single source. There is a lot of fire departments who unintentionally don't even realize they're rigging bids when they put out a bid to multiple companies, but they write the big bid so only one company meets the spec for that bid. That's bid rigging. So be cautious not to get yourself jammed up where you write a spec where it's so narrow that only one company can apply. If you really want that one company, do it as a single source, justify it through your budget process. Don't put yourself in that position.
That's
PJ?
right.
Yep. So there's two more topics that I'd like to capture, but we're also at that 1 hour mark or so, which we usually like to keep our shows at that hour point for our listeners. So I'll do is I'm going to pose both topics. We'll start with Chief Otto. If you want to give a brief opinion on both topics or some information on both topics, and then we'll go to Chief Peña and we'll let Frank close it out. So those two topics are kind of the new technology, specifically with AI, as well as what would you like to tell us about the Metro Fire Chiefs? Chief Otto?
Well, I think, I was at a conference and they go, if you can name one thing that's going to be a game changer, what would it be? And they talked about AI. So to me, I think we need to embrace it in the right way. And I think it could be a force multiplier. It's already paying dividends when we talk about wildfire, being able to recognize it, where there's systems that will be able to reduce the number of false alarms because it will be able to recognize whether it's a fire or not within buildings. So AI, I'm a huge fan. And what was the second one? The second thing?
Yeah, with your involvement with Metro Fire Chiefs, I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak upon that organization if you'd like.
Yeah, so the Metro is, when you look at fire service organizations, it's fairly small. There's in the United States, there's probably about 150 eligible departments. But the thing about the Metros is that their firefighters represent about 150,000. So that's almost half of the career firefighters within the United States. And then we protect about 45% of the population. So really what we're doing is trying to make inroads with other organizations so that we can leverage the resources that the Metro has to really push our fire service forward. A good example is when we talked about the vehicles, we're working with different groups in order to bring that national spec to bear that will pay dividends down the road. And I think that's really the value of the Metro and the opportunity that the Metro has to make an impact within our nation's fire service.
Chief Peña?
Well, Chief, I think that, in my opinion, I think the most valuable technologies, what they do for us is they enhance our situational awareness and our decision making. We've found great success here in Houston with developing partnerships with local tech companies and universities, I think, for innovative problem solving and assisting us with addressing certain pinch points or certain issues. So, look, I think that is going to be a game changer for us. AI, some of these other predictive models of technology, those are going to be huge in the fire service to be able to keep up and try to meet the increasing demand. And in terms of the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Association, I can't say enough about that organization. I think more than anything, it just provides for robust information exchange and talking about best practices. A lot of times, we think we have an answer to a particular problem, but getting different perspectives from individuals who are dealing with the same issues, right? And the Metro is the largest fire departments in the world. They're dealing with the same issues at almost the same level. So getting a different perspective is important, because one of the things I've learned is that we don't live long enough to make all the mistakes ourselves. So if we can learn from somebody else's mistake, that's always going to be a benefit for you and your organization.
Chief, that's great. And I just have one comment as far as AI. I'm going to turn it over to Frank. And when for those listening, when we're talking about AI and being a force multiplier, like Chief Otto said, we're not talking about helping you write some letters or some fancy emails. We're talking about processes, procedures, analysis, and creating something that was buried in one of your messages earlier, big data, providing us the big data and the information that we need to advance our organization. So those are great points. Frank?
On AI, PJ, it's no different than a computer or a calculator. You got to put the right information in to get the right information out. And a lot of times that goes back to our lieutenants, our captains, our frontline officers, to putting that right data in, not only property lost, but also property saved. Allow the chiefs to make that budget justification. When you're at the table as a lieutenant, tell everybody, like Bobby Gahuli, our battalion chief, used to say, everybody put your phone away, put the technology away, and let's eat. I would highly recommend that in any firehouse. Get everybody off their device to at least eat a meal together. It brings everybody together, brings that firehouse together. But I do agree. I think AI on our larger systems are going to be unbelievable, but we just need to make sure we're putting the right information into it. This was a great, the experience on this call is just unbelievable. And Chief Peña, I've had the highest respect for you. I had an opportunity to do a meeting in Houston, and it was when Zoom was new and my computer kept cutting out. It was so embarrassing at the time. But one of the things I was so impressed is while everybody was struggling with having these online meetings, Chief Peña's command staff at the end of the meeting, every one of his assistant chiefs or district chiefs or whoever was on those calls, everyone would come on and ask a question. And it was like a really cogent question. And you could tell that he was the type of leader that they knew that if they were on a call with him, they better pay attention. They better ask questions. And he really mastered that technology long before I could even pretend to. So, Chief, honor to have you on. Honor to have you to contribute to my book along with PJ. Chief Otto, just met you, talked to you once on the phone, but I see great things in your future. And thank you so much for what everybody does for the fire service. Let's just go around the horn one time. PJ, last word. Give Chief Otto the last word, and then Chief Peña, and we'll take it off tonight. And again, this was a great show. The fire service is hearing from people that they don't get to talk to all the time. So this is great. PJ?
Yep. One last thing. FDIC is right around the corner. And if you're struggling with the most difficult piece of FDIC is trying to figure out what class you're going to take, Frank and I will both be there. I have my workshop on Tuesday afternoon at 1:30, the Evolving Fireground. And Frank and I will both have times that will be at or around the Fire Engineering Clarion Books and Video booth. Stop by, say hello, and love to put names with faces and actually shake your hand. So look forward to seeing everybody there.
Chief Otto?
We talked about a lot of topics, and one of the things that we should always stay focused on is while we can invest in AI, we can invest in trucks, we can invest in stations. The only thing that we can invest in that will get better, guaranteed over time, is each one of our firefighters, and we need to continue to invest in them because without them, we are not a fire service.
Very well said. Chief Peña?
Well, look, I want to thank all of you guys for one, the invitation and just the contribution here. I mean, the platform that you guys have built here has become an invaluable resource for the fire service and for professionals at all levels, really. So I thank you guys for what you do here. And Chief Ricci, look, man, it was a tremendous honor to be invited to contribute to your book, Command Presence. I think that your dedication to elevating the fire service through really thoughtful leadership and practical wisdom that you bring has really made you a respected voice in the fire service, and it was an honor to have participated in that effort. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Chief. That's it for Politics and Tactics tonight. Everybody be safe and take care of each other.